This week, we are returning to the story. I hope that you have read chapter 8 on your own at home. It's the story of Judges, and it is quite interesting and full of intrigue. In fact, we could probably do a lengthy sermon series just on the Judges. Now, our section this week occurs during the time of the Judges, so we're still sort of hanging out with the Judges. Ruth is a fairly well-known book. Last year, we focused on the book specifically on Naomi for our Heroes of the Faith sermon series. You'll likely recall that Ruth is a Moabite woman who married one of Naomi's sons. I find this interesting in and of itself because it means by this point, it was fairly common to have marriages between the Israelites and foreigners. There's not any pushback against Ruth for being a foreigner, or Naomi for her sons, both of them marrying foreign women. Not only are both Ruth and Orpah foreigners, but we know that they worship their own gods, as Naomi mentions it in the beginning of the book of Ruth. So Ruth follows Naomi and declares her love and dedication to Naomi, no matter what. Boaz comes onto the scene and allows Ruth to glean in his fields. Then Boaz offers to redeem Ruth and Naomi, which really means that he's going to marry Ruth, and then any children that they have will actually be in the name of Ruth's first husband, so that his family name will carry on. This was a pretty common practice at that point in time. Now, Ruth is often used as an example of an extremely upright and honorable woman. It's interesting to me that yet again we find another foreign woman, like Rahab, who plays such an important role in the story. God likes to choose unlikely people, doesn't he? I've said time and time again, this is a pattern we're gonna see. Now, the other day, as I was preparing my notes for this sermon, I was sitting in the gazebo at my house. You may have seen it. It was in the last video. It is nestled on the edge of some woods, and I often retreat to it when I want to feel connected with nature. While I work there, I am typically surrounded by adorable woodland creatures, and I like to pretend that I'm a Disney princess. I really do delight in the chipmunks that scurry across the floor of the gazebo as I work, and the squirrels that chirp at me if I make a noise that they're not expecting. There are always dozens of birds too, sparrows and blue jays mostly, but a few cardinals and goldfinches and of course robins, among others, show themselves from time to time. It really is just a delightful escape for a while. So as I was working on this sermon, it started to drizzle, and then it picked up to a pretty steady rain. Now the birds, they immediately flew away, not wanting to get their feathers wet. They all quickly retreated to the warmth of their snuggly nests high in the trees. I'm imagining they're snuggly. I've never hung out in a bird nest. The squirrels, though, they kept working, and they didn't just keep working, they actually started working more frantically. They brought their acorns to their individual hiding places, and they quickly buried them. And then they headed back out for the next one, and were moving at a faster pace than I'd ever seen. It was as if this unexpected change in the weather prompted them to respond by working harder than they ever had before. I think that Ruth was like a squirrel. Trust me, I'm going somewhere with this. Don't turn the video off just yet. She faced this sudden change in plans. All of a sudden, she wasn't living in Moab with her husband. So she had a choice. She could head back to the comfort of home, or she could set off with Naomi, working extra hard towards preparing for what God had in store. Ruth chose the harder road. She knew that there were no certainties by going with Naomi. Naomi made that very, very clear. And then once she got there, she had to work hard gleaning in the fields. Gleaning was hard work. You basically stripped the left behind crops, often picking them up off the ground. In this case, left behind barley. And then she had to process the grain so that she could take it home, which of course was a manual process at this point in time. We are faced with these tough decisions too from time to time. We get to choose to be squirrels or birds. And there are times when we need to be birds. If our feathers get wet, we won't be able to fly after all, right? Several years ago, I was friends with someone. Well, I thought we were friends. And this person honestly meant the world to me. I spent countless hours in conversation with them. They would call me at all hours of the day or night, and I would take their calls. I would take their calls at work. I would take their calls at 2 o'clock in the morning. They needed me. They were going through some really hard things after all. But then I realized that when I needed that person to be there for me, they were nowhere to be found. This person also eventually revealed to me that they had been lying to me about everything. Their severe health issues that I'd had every person I'd ever met praying for were made up. Their fights with family members never happened. Now, to be clear, this person revealed the truth to me because they realized it was wrong and it was hurtful to act that way and unhealthy for them. They were getting help for some significant mental health issues, and they needed friends who would stand by them. So do you know what I did? I flew away. My friend needed someone who could help her through this really challenging time, but I couldn't do it. I was too wounded by it, and there was no way that I could help this person and be able to do what God had in store for me. So I was a bird. I wasn't Ruth. You know who else was a bird? Naomi. She fled home after her family died. She got out of the storm and nestled in the warmth of her nest for a while, even telling people to simply call her bitter. Now, my newly married best friend is an amazing human being. While in seminary, she worked a 2-point call, meaning she served 2 congregations, as well as a full graduate level course load. And if that weren't enough, she actually worked at the library at the seminary. And at one of the congregations she served, she uncovered tens of thousands of dollars of embezzlement and years of fraud by a beloved member of the community. She had a choice: stay and attempt to heal the congregation while doing all the other things she was tasked with, or fly away. My petite friend chose to be a squirrel. She worked tirelessly with her denomination and her congregation to uncover the depth of the financial wounds and find a way to help the congregation move forward, whatever that meant for them in those circumstances. She spent hour upon hour in conversation with members who were betrayed by this person and who frankly blamed her for uncovering it because she was the one who tore away the veil of what they thought had been a perfect situation. She worked with the police. She wrote term papers in Hebrew and then immediately had town hall meetings where she explained that the church would need to shutter the doors and sell the parsonage that she was living in just to break even. Then she immediately went to hospital visits for a member of her other congregation who still needed her care and love. My best friend was about as close to Ruth as you can imagine. She was filled with a desire to do the work that God had placed in front of her, no matter how hard it was. Back in my yard, after the rain stopped, something interesting happened. The squirrels, wet and worn from their frantic work, retreated back to their homes. They'd earned their rest, after all. The birds, though, they were back as the last raindrops fell. They returned to finish the work that they'd left behind when the rain started. Both the squirrels and the birds got their work done. Both Ruth and Naomi were able to be redeemed and became important members of our family, of our story. Ruth is Obed's mother. Obed is King David's grandfather, father of Jesse. Ruth, Rahab, and Tamar are the only women that appear in Matthew's genealogy of Jesus. These women each represent a twist in God's story, where the woman has been stronger than her circumstances, and in some cases, more righteous than the men and the stories that they are in. Today, I'm asking that you carefully choose whether to be a bird or to be a squirrel. Either way, when you face an unexpected turn, you will be put to work. You will have to rely on God. You will indeed have to finish your task, no matter which option you choose. As long as you trust God, remain faithful to Him, and do the work, He will provide for you. Like Ruth and Naomi, we too have been redeemed. We've been redeemed by Jesus, and that redemption follows us every day of our life and calls us to lead our lives focused on our story, on God's story, living and growing in each of us. So as you go about living your story, make choices to live as God requires. Take time to rest and fly away to your nest when you need, knowing that you will come back and finish that work. And when you're able, work diligently and harder than ever before so that you can accomplish the great things that God has placed in front of you. We have amazing examples in both Ruth and Naomi. Both of them are loyal and faithful throughout their stories. And in the end, Naomi is no longer called Mara. She's no longer bitter, but she's filled with joy because God has provided, as she knew He eventually would. So whether you're in a moment of bitterness or a moment of hard work, know that God is with you and guiding you. Amen. Amen.